All right, we're ready to go with our first of our pair of our afternoon feature presentations. And I did want to mention once again that I am getting all the slides and handouts from all the speakers, and you'll get a note from me with a distribution download for all of the material that I receive. You'll definitely get that, and it should be probably by Monday at the latest. All right, well, now let's get into our next session. And so this is the one where everybody's been asking me what content in the zombie apocalypse is about. And so now we're going to find out. I'm waiting for the second half of The Walking Dead, but we'll see if this applies to that. Our next speaker made the trip from New York City to be with us, but she's out at a lot of conferences, and I've just recently finished one of the latest of many things that she writes, which was content for mobile. I think she's going to be talking about that today. So please welcome Karen McGrane.
You guys want to know what I think is like totally great, like totally awesome? You all, the good people of Seattle, thank you so much for having me here. It is, yeah, come on, give it up. Thank you, Joe, for inviting me. It is always such a pleasure to come out here. You all have the best food. You apparently have the best football team. So really appreciate you being here. You want to know what else I think is like super fantastic? Print. My God, print is a fantastic technology. I mean, you put the words on the paper and they stay there. You don't have to worry about keeping it updated all the time. So print, when you think about the 500 years of the printing press and the thousands of years that we have of putting ink on paper, you realize how central print is in how human beings think about communication, how we communicate hierarchy and relationships and value and meaning. All of those are derived from our experience in putting ink on paper. And then we had to go and invent the web, which I think on balance has been totally worth it. But man, is it a pain in the ass. So the web just turned 20, maybe 25, opinions vary, but 25 years. And when you look back on the history of where the web came from, the very fundamental technologies, HTML, hypertext markup language, the URL, the Uniform Resource Locator, those technologies were created with the explicit intention that anyone, anywhere, could create a document that could be updated instantaneously and accessible globally. And when you really take a step back from the day-to-day stuff that we do every day and take a moment to just appreciate just how transformational that is in the history of human communication, I mean, just how different that is from anything that has come before, 25 years isn't nearly enough time for human beings to have wrapped their head around the ways that the web is different. And so as a result, for the last quarter century or so, we've basically been band-aiding ourselves along by imagining that, well, a web page, it's basically just like a piece of paper, right? I mean, it just has the same principles as a piece of paper, and it's kind of the same shape as a piece of paper. And so now, with the rise of mobile devices, this is what has forced us to come to grips with the fact that the web is different. And I want to be clear about this. The web has always been different. It's just that now, with the rise of mobile devices, when I talk about content strategy for mobile or publishing on mobile, I don't mean how do you get your stuff to work on smartphones. What I mean is that now with the rise of mobile and tablet devices, we are forced to give up the shared hallucination that we have been operating under, that we have any control at all about the size of someone's screen, about the layout of that screen, about the form factor, about the input mechanism that they're using. All of that is gone. And it's never coming back. And so I think it's pretty easy at this moment in time to kind of look at the rise of mobile and smartphones and go, man, this is already hard. And the thing is, it isn't going to stop. I'm not a futurist, okay? I want to be like one thing super clear to you. I am not here to predict the future. If I could do that, I'd be making a fortune doing that. But I can predict one thing for you, and that is that there will be a next big thing. And whatever that next big thing is, we are going to have to figure out, how do we publish to it? How do we get our stuff onto it? Maybe that next big thing is going to be smart TV. Okay? A lot of people hypothesizing that the next big wave will be the fight for the living room. And I think when you think about the smart TV as being a device that accesses the web, you really starts to drive home the fallacy that we have any control over the size of somebody's screen or how they're using it or the mechanism that they have to interact with it. I mean, the full scope and range of devices that we are designing for, down from the tiniest little smartphone all the way up to the giant TV screen, makes you realize, oh yeah, at what point do we have to admit we can't pretend this is a piece of paper anymore? Or maybe the next big thing is going to be in-car systems. Now, when I think about in-car systems, I don't imagine somebody having a touch screen in the dashboard of their car. What I imagine is that somebody has an audio interface that they are then using, that they can interact with through a touch screen or through hardware buttons. And, you know, I think it's, at this point in time, it's like really easy to mock the concept of audio interfaces, you know, to laugh at what Siri says when you ask her something. You know what else sucked for like 25 years? Touch screens. Touch screens were terrible. I mean, you remember you'd go to the ATM and you'd have to figure out how to angle your finger just right to get the button to push. For 20 years, touch screens were seen as this also-ran technology, never going to make the prime time. And then one day, touch screens worked. And they worked perfectly. And it transformed our entire industry in the space of like 5 years. So I don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to be 5 years, 15 years, 50 years? But I'm going to tell you one thing. One day, the Star Trek computer is going to become a reality. And I got to tell you, the last thing I want when I walk up to the Star Trek computer and I ask it something is for it to start spitting back HTTP:// at me. So if you're interested in this, take a look at what Google is doing with what they call their conversation group. Okay, now Google is a company that can make cars that drive themselves. And that's not even their core business. That's just like some weird side project somebody dreamed up. No, but the idea of how human beings communicate with technology through language, that is squarely in the sweet spot of what Google does. And they are spending a lot of money in researching how to make audio interfaces real. So if that's the case, why, maybe the next big thing is going to be Google Glass. I don't really think Google Glass is going to be the next big thing. I think Google Glass is like the Segway of mobile. It's like a Segway, but for your face. But I do believe that the idea of wearable interfaces, wearable displays, is going to be a reality. I worked this past year with this industrial parts company. So it's like they make a giant catalog where all they sell is industrial products, you know, washers and screws and pipes and things. And I went and I met with them and I said, look, I'm not here to tell you when you were going to stop printing that catalog. You know, I'm not here to say that, you know, the day has come. But I think we can all look each other in the eye and say, a day will come when you will decide that the world no longer needs a phone book-sized catalog of different parts. So when that day comes, how likely do you think it will be that your audience, people who work in factories, people who work in industrial settings, will have, as probably one of the most likely ways they interact, a heads-up display? They're not going to walk in the back room and use their desktop computer, and they may not even pull their phone out of their pocket. This may be something that is actually used in industrial environments. So what do you have to do, starting right now, so that your publishing processes are in a place where when the day comes when you don't publish that catalog anymore and you have to publish to a wearable heads-up display, that you will be able to do it? Because right now, everything that you do is so geared toward how you figure out how you present that information on a piece of paper. There is no way that you're going to be able to adapt to this new device unless you spend years getting ready to do it. So, you know, Google Glass, maybe not the next big thing. Certainly the next big thing is Watches, right? Everybody's talking about watches. The Apple Watch is going to come out soon. And so when I talk about watches, people are often like, oh, Karen, come on, really? Aren't we done now? Like, I really want to read a document on my watch. And I agree. That may not be the primary use scenario for many people. But the watch as a hub of a larger digital ecosystem, a watch that is a controller for a smart TV, or a controller for an audio interface, or something that needs to be able to display titles and information and provide navigation, even if it is not the primary consumption mechanism. That, to me, suggests that, yes, we do need to figure out how we publish to watches, even if it's not the same concept. But I know, watches so tiny, can't possibly be the next big thing, right? Surely the next big thing is going to be stadium scoreboards. Come on, everybody, go Huskies. Woo! Let's get our content where everybody can see it. This is a joke. I put this in here as a joke. I thought it'd be funny, right? Because like watches are tiny, and then scoreboards are big. And then I turned around and I talked to a client who said that the biggest problem that they're trying to solve right now is digital signage. So it's a university client, right? And they just bought all these digital signs that they want to put up all over campus. And they came to me and they said, look, Karen, we have a website, we have a native app, and now we have these digital signs. And we want a way that we can easily manage and maintain our content in one place and have them automatically published to these three very different form factors. And I was like, hey, have you thought about treating the digital signs as if they're just a completely separate silo and just manage those independently? And they were like, Karen, ain't nobody got time for that. No, the whole reason we're talking to you is that we want a way to have one set of content that automatically appears and looks good and is readable on these three wildly different form factors. This isn't some crazy futuristic dystopia that these people are living in. This is a real problem that they are trying to solve right now, here today. And so if digital signage is a problem that many organizations are trying to solve for the enterprise, maybe you too, one day, will be trying to solve that problem in your own home, right? Can't talk about the future without talking about the internet refrigerator. You're right. I don't think the internet refrigerator is the next big thing either. I mean, it's like, is the biggest problem facing our society today that I can't check Twitter in the 30 seconds that it takes me to get a Diet Coke? But the idea that we will have a connected network of sensors and devices in our home, heck, maybe it's not an internet refrigerator. Maybe your entire glass top cooktop will be a big iPad screen, and you'll be able to use that to navigate through recipes or news or information while you're cooking. Or, and I do think this is the biggest challenge facing our society today, what happens when toaster printers become a reality? Is your content ready to be burned onto delicious toast? These are the problems that we're here to solve together. So I'm really excited to let you guys know toaster printers are today a reality. You now can burn your selfie into delicious toast. What a time to be alive. So right now, today, organizations are already faced with the challenge of how do they get their content onto a wide variety of different platforms and devices. They've got the web, they've got their intranet, they've been struggling with what do they do about blogs and social channels and email. Then mobile came along, and they've got to deal with the mobile web and various apps for different native platforms and tablets. Heck, some of them are even still struggling with what do they do with print. And tomorrow, it is a veritable zombie apocalypse of new devices and platforms and screen sizes and resolutions, and they just keep coming, and they're not going to stop. So the question becomes, how do we protect ourselves from the zombie apocalypse? How do we figure out how to wrestle with all of these different devices, all of these different platforms, all of these different screen sizes, all of these different input mechanisms? And I believe that the solution lies in something that goes to the very heart of the way that the web works. And it is the idea of how do we separate content from presentation? How do we achieve true separation of content from form? Now, when you talk to people in the web industry, everybody's got an opinion about what this means. Sometimes I'll go talk to an audience of developers and I'll say, hey, what does separating content from presentation mean to you? And everybody's like, oh, CSS, I know this one. But the truth is that true separation of content from form is something that is much bigger and goes much deeper on the web. It is something that touches the work that every single person involved in making the website does. And it is something that up until this point in human history, there was essentially no need for us to even talk about it. I mean, you imagine going to this medieval monk who is laboriously hand-scribing documents and asking him to say, hey, could we talk about what it would mean to communicate the substance of this message separate from the format in which you are presenting it? It wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't, it's almost absurd to suggest that. And yet, at this moment in history, that is the issue that I think is most pressing for everybody as we work on the web. Dan Jacobson, he's the API guy from Netflix, formerly of NPR. He says that the future of content management systems is in their ability to capture the content in a clean, presentation-independent way. And when you hear something like this, I think it's really easy to boil this down to a problem with markup. To say, oh, basically, it's like, oh, well, get your HTML out of my content. Like, get your chocolate out of my peanut butter. And, I have gained a reputation as being somebody who really hates rich text editors on the web. Okay, I complain about this a lot. I complain about the tools that we give content creators, where we encourage them to imagine that what they are doing when they create a website is just like Microsoft Word. Why? You can go in there and you can dump whatever you want in that big box, and you can put a table in and add some custom bullets, and you can make this purple and you can float it to the right, and it's going to look perfect on the one and only one platform that you were imagining when you created it, which was the desktop web. And so I rail against these, not because I hate Microsoft Word, but because when I look at this and I see a content creator who has said, oh, well, I'm going to take this table of contents box here, and I'm going to make that purple, and I'm going to float it to the right. What she was doing is she was attempting to say, well, this information is not the same as the other information. This information should be set off in a sidebar. It is intended to provide signposting. It is a guideline to what will appear in the document. But she had no tools to communicate the semantics of that information. The only tools we gave her were the tools that enabled her to tell us what she wanted it to look like. And so that, I complain, where I shake my fist at these things, these WYSIWYG toolbars that we put at the top of the screen that encourage content creators to imagine that they're making a Word document. I got to tell you guys something. I love coming to talk to groups of people like this, and I really feel like, I get the message out this way, but my graffiti crime spree is going exceptionally well. I really feel like I'm getting the message out in this new channel in a way that I'm reaching people I couldn't otherwise reach. So I complain about WYSIWYG, right? Do you guys know where WYSIWYG came from? It came from Xerox. It came from Xerox PARC. Because they invented the laser printer. Okay, think about that for a second. Up until this point, a Xerox machine could only make a copy of a document that already existed. Xerox came up with a way that you could print out whatever you wanted. Except they needed a way for you to actually be able to create that document. And so Xerox invented the entire concept of the graphical user interface. They invented the entire concept of what you see is what you get so that they could sell laser printers. And the laser printer is, I think, arguably the most important component of the personal computing revolution. Okay, so it was demand for laser printers. It was demand for people to be able to create really badly designed newsletters that used too many fonts and looked like a ransom note. That drove people to want to get early Macs, they got early PCs, they bought laser printers, and that led directly to the rise of the web, with people now being able to use their computers. And I think I can very fairly say that all of us here have jobs today because of the work that was done to drive the personal computing revolution, and all of that set squarely on a foundation of the invention of and the demand for laser printers. And I can say, with a huge amount of respect for all of the work that has gone into this, that the web is not a laser printer. There is nothing about using the web, about publishing to the web, that has anything in common with the laser printer that you have hooked up to your desk. And so the problem that I have with what you see is what you get, the problem that I have with content creation tools on the web today is that we are using an antiquated mental model from the desktop publishing revolution 40 years ago to explain to people what it means to publish on the web. Ted Nelson says that imitating paper on a computer screen is like tearing the wings off a 747 and using it as a bus on the highway. The web is better than print. The web can do so much more than print. And yet, we are constraining the mental models and the processes that we use to tell people how to work on the web with antiquated tools from the print era. And I believe the core of this, the most central one, the one that is so hard to get away from that you almost can't even imagine what it would be like to not work that way, is something I like to call container-first thinking. I mean, it's so human, right? I mean, how do you start thinking about anything? Like you get that blank piece of paper and you look at the boundaries of that piece of paper and you think, okay, well, my ideas are going to go inside here. What is the first thing that Photoshop asks you when you open it up? It wants you to know the size of the canvas. The most important thing it needs to know is how big is that thing going to be? And this is a mindset that continues to follow us around, even well into the mobile era. My dear friend, Ethan Marcotte, talks about his process for the very first responsive redesign of the Boston Globe. He says they started out by identifying some common breakpoints. They said, okay, well, we're going to have more boxes to work with, but let's first figure out what those boxes are going to be. Now, to Ethan's credit, he steps back in and says, hey, by the way, don't do this. This isn't how it should work anymore. But you get how deeply ingrained that desire is. Or lately, I've been hearing about a new interaction paradigm, a new publishing model for the web. It's called cards. Cards are the future of the web. Cards. They're like pages, but tiny. All of this sits on a framework of saying we need to know what something is. We need to know the boundaries of it before we can define it. And I see this container-first thinking, not just in our design processes, but even all the way down in the very roots, in the bowels of our publishing processes and the content management system. So I worked with a client recently, and I get to see a lot of companies' content management underpants, and they let me go poke around in their CMS, and they're like, oh, here are the content types that we have. And I'm like, some of these things are not like the others. See, some of these things are things that you actually publish. See, articles and press releases are content, but accordion, HTML block, flash wrapper, carousel is not a content type. Carousel is not a thing that you publish. Carousel is a container that you publish. And so this isn't just baked into our design process. This isn't just deep in the way that we think. This is actually like rooted in the architecture of our very systems. And so you might ask, what is this? Well, let me tell you a story about the blobbiest blob that we have ever blobbed onto the web. It is the PDF. So the PDF, let me first get one thing clear before I start talking about the PDF. Nobody is reading your PDF, okay? No one is reading it. The World Bank recently did a study where they said, let's look at all of the PDFs we have published since 2008. And what they found was that a third of them were never even downloaded. And 40% of them were downloaded fewer than 100 times. Valuable information locked up in a format that is geared only for print. And I did some work recently with the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. And I think when you look at the types of things they publish, you start to realize, oh, here's why these organizations are so attached to their PDFs. They've got complex charts and graphs, they've got tables, they've got equations, they've got massive amounts of information. And it's very difficult for them, using publishing processes that are available today, to create a document as easily as they can using Microsoft Word and spitting it out as a PDF. So PDFs and other blobs are with us today because they're not, we're stuck with them because they're not digital. They're not responsive, okay? So your PDF, it's like, that's not going to work on somebody's phone. Somebody's not going to be able to read that in a meaningful way. They're not searchable. I mean, there are things one can do to make a PDF more searchable, but it breaks people's sort of fundamental understanding of what they're going to get when they search for something, if what ends up happening is they get a PDF. And finally, they're not accessible. And again, there are heroic things that accessibility developers can do to improve the accessibility of PDFs. But a better option would be, well, why don't you just make this truly digital native text? It'll be a lot easier. So why don't they do it? Well, the truth is, having a PDF gives a central banker a familiar tool that they can work with. They can work with Microsoft Word, publish easily. They don't need to change their workflow. It's a very simple process for them. So what do they do to get something on the web? Well, they use the exact same tool they've been using for the last 20 years. They print it to PDF, and they tell someone to post it on the internet. Boom. What would that process be like if they actually had to create that document in their content management system? Well, the challenge is that really complex things like charts or tables or graphs or those equations, like there's not a good way for someone like a central banker to be able to do that in a CMS today. I guarantee you it would probably take a team of 5 or 6 people to do all of the production that one person can reasonably do using Microsoft Word. And so that means that for them to be able to create a document that has the kind of running narrative flow, it's not really supported on the web today. It's only supported in tools that we have for print. And so as a result, we are stuck with content that is locked up in one particular output format. I spoke with a law firm in New York recently that just went through a massive redesign. And they said, as part of our goal, we said we wanted to look through the massive dump of PDFs that we have and sort through it and pick out the stuff that we thought actually should be real digital text. And so they did. They said, we found 6,250 PDFs that we thought had valuable information in them. And we wanted to make those actually publishable from our content management system. So what did it take them to do it? What did it take for them to get their stuff out of this format? Well, they started out with a process that I call content modeling, which I'll go into in a little bit here. That process took them 3 weeks. They had to pay 4 people a reasonably high rate of $175 an hour to go through and actually figure out what the structure of that content should be. It cost them $84,000. Then they did a pilot program. So what they did is they took the draft content model that they had created, and then they took some new content and tried to fit it into that model, to test the model, to make sure it was working. That took a week, cost them $28,000. Then they went through the process that I like to call copying and pasting, where they went through all of those 6,000 PDFs, took the content out of them, put them into the model. That took them 5 months. They paid a team of 3 people. These people got paid less, so they were making $75 an hour. But that's still over $200,000 of time to get these 6,000 PDFs taken care of. So the total process took them 6 months, cost them over $300,000 to get information out of 6,000 PDFs. In contrast, they had 25,000 PDFs that they were like, meh, they're great, keep them as PDFs. So the process for getting these onto the internet was a process that I like to call shoveling. That shoveling took one developer, took them 1 week, cost them $2,800. So the cost to us of having information that is locked up in one particular output format is high. The result of this process was that now they've still got a big mess of garbage on their website. They have documents that nobody is going to read, and they have what may have been valuable information that is now permanently trapped in that PDF. It will never be free. So I believe that if we are to survive the zombie apocalypse, if we are actually going to be able to have content that can live flexibly and fluidly across whatever device, separate from whatever container it lives in, we have got to go through the process of what I call content modeling. So content modeling, I'm fond of describing as the process of taking what used to be or what could be blobs on our websites or blobs in our PDFs and transforming them into clean, well-structured chunks of content. Content modeling is what makes things like the NPR Create Once, Publish Everywhere case study possible. It's what enables them to say our information is stored at a granular enough level and it is targetable for different platforms or targetable based on other contextual cues. But it's also what makes possible the example that I gave earlier of a university wanting to have digital signs up on campus. So for them to be able to have both a web page and a digital sign that contains the same information, they need that information to be properly modeled. You could imagine that if their web page was just one giant blob, if the information like the photo and the summary of the event and the location of the event and the date and time of the event, if those were not stored in a properly fielded, modeled fashion, if all of that was just one big blob in a WordPress field, then when they wanted to take that to that digital sign, they would have no way to get at it and no way to reformat it in an appropriate way so that it could be rendered, same content, different display on these digital signs. And I want to make it clear, this is also something that is necessary for responsive design. So in this Guardian beta, one of the things that I like to show here is that content modeling helps get content out at a granular enough level so that we can progressively enhance content for different device types. So if you see here, they have a block where they have one size of headline that has an image, and then the headline below it has no image attached. When you get up to larger sizes, when you progressively enhance it, they can add the images in because they have the content stored at that level of granularity. Same thing here. They have a block where they have headlines that have no images attached, and then at larger breakpoints, they can progressively enhance that content to show images. This is a really simple example, but it shows the idea that even if you are doing a responsive design where you are intending to send the same content to every device type, having this kind of modeled, structured content will help you provide a better experience at whatever breakpoint or whatever size device someone has. So what does this content modeling mean? Well, it means that you start out by figuring out what's the type of content that you have. Is it an article? Is it a product spec? Is it a medical condition? I do a lot of workshops where I talk to clients about this, and I did one with a hospital recently, and it was like they were so excited to have a chance to sit down and brainstorm what their content types were. In fact, it was like you could see that they were waiting for somebody to come along and say, please tell us what it is that you actually publish. Up until this point, their web team had just been handed templates. They'd been handed templates to say, oh, well, here's your 3-column template, and here's your 2-column template, here's your hero template. And they were forced to figure out how do they fit all of the stuff that they publish into the boxes that somebody else made for them. By starting out by saying, hey, why don't you tell me what it is that you publish? They were able to come up with a massive list in like 2 hours of brainstorming. And then we were able to go in and document, okay, what are all these things? How do they work? What do they mean? And that made the future design process go a lot more smoothly because we knew what all the Lego pieces were that we were working with. So similarly, once you have all the content types, then the job is to figure out what are the attributes of those content types. So I often describe this as like, what are the fields that are attached to those content types, or what are the objects that are attached to them? It's like if you say, well, what's an article? Well, an article is a headline, and a deck, and a body, and a byline, and an image. You know, it's basically, let's figure out what the pieces are. So you might think, okay, now, once we've figured out these fields or content objects, this must be pretty straightforward, right? Like recipes is the classic example of let's define what a content model is. You know, everybody knows what a recipe is, right? Got ingredients, you got steps, pretty simple. I worked with Food and Wine this past year. They are a recipe database publisher. And we sat down and we said, okay, let's model out what a recipe means to you. And so you're like, okay, recipe, it's like ingredients, steps, that's it, right? Right? Well, no. I mean, the magic is in the details. So for Food and Wine, for them, the concept of chefs was really important to them. So every recipe would sit within a larger, broader category, and then every recipe would have a chef attached to it, or people attached to who actually was involved with creating that recipe. And then for Food and Wine, we sat down and did a faceted taxonomy of all of the different categories that a recipe might fall into. So What type of cuisine is it? Is it Greek or German? What type of diet? Is it gluten-free or low-fat? What equipment does it need? Do you need a slow cooker or a pressure cooker? Having this sort of content model defined was what made it possible then for their editors to go through, tag all of the recipes appropriately. It's what made the recipes findable. It's what made the recipes searchable. So great, right? Does all make sense? We figured out recipes? Well, no. See, the magic of the content modeling is that even for people who have nearly identical content, I genuinely believe that the value proposition, the benefit to that brand, the benefit to that publication, comes through in the way that they define that content model. So in contrast, it's a fantastic case study of what is a local Seattle restaurant called Lark. So the Lark Cookbook was a Kickstarter-funded project where they came up with a cookbook that would appear on a variety of different platforms. So they have a website, they have native apps, and most fascinatingly, to me, content publishing nerd, they had a print cookbook. And all three of these platforms were published from the exact same Drupal content management system. So they had one CMS, one content model that was outputting to three wildly different formats with three wildly different capabilities. And so the content model that supported this cookbook was very different. I got this one from my friend Jeff Eaton, who talked to these people on a podcast. So yes, of course, they started out with a recipe, right? Great central concept. But for this author, for this chef, the concept of the plate was actually the primary organizing principle for how he conceived of these recipes. So it wasn't just that you had a recipe, it's that you were intended to serve several items together as a meal. And so the plate was the primary thing that he wanted you to think about. Beyond that, he believed that each of these plates sat within a season. Interestingly enough, this chef believed that there are only 3 seasons, which may possibly be true here in Seattle, I am not sure. He also had varietals of wine that were attached to each plate. And then the organization of the recipes, for each one, there were steps that you could follow. But coming off of those steps was not just ingredients, but also the techniques that the chef would follow. And for the digital formats, they created a library of media types that they would use to illustrate the different techniques. So for that chef, being able to illustrate how you would whip something or how you would blend something, how you would perform various cooking techniques was something they wanted to include. And so even though this is the almost identical concept for how you might present recipe information, the actual underlying content model clearly expresses the values of the organization and expresses the goals of how somebody wants to communicate. And so often, this gets lost if we are too attached to focusing on what the template should be or what the interaction should be, what the container should be, before we figure out what the actual pieces are of the content model. And the grave problem with this that I will leave you with is that anybody see the New York Times innovation report that was leaked this past year? If you haven't seen this, go get it. It's fantastic. It is like, to me, it was like Deep Throat. So the New York Times, this got leaked via fax to BuzzFeed. And it's basically a 40-page document that outlines all of the things that the New York Times is either doing or not doing or doing wrong in digital. And for me, the big smoking gun was this particular quote. And here is the ugly truth about structured data. There are substantial costs to waiting. And the quote goes on to say, so for example, because our recipes were never properly tagged by ingredients and cooking time, we floundered for about 15 years trying to figure out how to create a useful recipe database. We can do it now, but only after spending a huge sum to retroactively structure the data. This, my friends, is the problem that we face, not just with PDFs, but with websites that are blobs of content. So let me leave you with. I genuinely believe that our future on the web requires that we escape from the blobs. We can no longer continue to publish to web pages as if they are print documents. We can no longer continue to imagine that a web page is just like a piece of paper. We must start including more structure in our documents. That future then, our future depends on content modeling. Our future involves separating away from imagining the container first, from handing off templates to clients where we basically give them a box and say, put your stuff here, and instead starting the process with a focused understanding of what the content is, what level of granularity it exists in, what the attributes of the content are, how those attributes will be stored, how those can be targeted by device type, how they could be targeted by context or other forms of personalization. That sort of content modeling is what will help us break free of this attention and being locked into one particular output format, and instead will allow us to get our stuff onto whatever platform we need to. Our future depends on our ability to fight off the zombies. Because those zombies are not stopping. Tomorrow it's a watch, next week it's going to be a TV set, next week it's going to be the car, next week it's going to be something that we haven't even invented yet. If I can guarantee you one thing, it is that humanity's drive for new technology has not yet been sated. And so the more we use this as an inflection point to say, not how do we get our stuff to work on a smartphone, but instead, how do we get our stuff to have a fighting chance of working on whatever device or platform or screen size or resolution or input mechanism happens to be the next big thing, that ability is what's going to save us from the zombie apocalypse. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions. We have about 5 minutes. Anybody want to ask Karen anything? Yeah, let me head over this way to Donna and get her question. Hey, Donna.
Hi, so I actually wanted to ask, being in Google, I actually know that we do a pretty good job of searching.
I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Like this? Okay. Just being in Google, actually, know we do quite a good job of searching PDFs and reading books. I mean, and also, like, I know we have, and not just us, there are a lot of, like, products who basically auto tag web pages and books. Like, isn't that something that a lot of those companies can just look at, like, go into? Basically using machine learning to kind of learn and understand pages or books and use and then tag these.
Sure.
This content.
The question is, like, don't we have robots to do this for us? Like, can't we use machine-based algorithms to go in and read the content on the page and tag it? And I will say yes. I think that there is absolutely a role for the robots in our future. However, I would make a distinction between that sort of taxonomy-based tagging that I'm describing. So, for example, you have a database of recipes, and all of that has been stored, and you want to be able to go in and say, like, is this recipe gluten-free? You might be able to set the robot on the task of churning out, robots, go in and look if wheat is used as an ingredient, or go and look for these ingredients that are listed. The problem is, what if you don't know what's an ingredient? Like, what if that text is all still just in there as a giant blob? Will you be able to get to that level of granularity in order to know, like, what is it? And so the process that I'm talking about with content modeling is saying you actually do need a human being to go in and say, oh, that's what that is. Recipes are a fairly straightforward example. If I were to look at the Boston Fed example and say, how would you know how to break that down into component parts? Or if you were thinking about my law firm example, like everything that they have that's just in one giant PDF of a blob, if they wanted to break that up into meaningful, more granular pieces, a robot's not going to be able to tell you how to do that. So a robot might be able to help with the taxonomy classification, but it's not going to help with the actual modeling process.
Any other questions? Get up. Here we go. Let's see. I'll get Lisa.
Hey, Karen.
Hi, Lisa.
I love this talk, and I am going to wrap it up and bring it back to every client that I have, because they keep asking me, but why do we have to do a content model? I don't get it. You're doing a content matrix, as if one was the same as the other. The point is that do enough companies have content management systems to support this type of vision? Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. So do we have the back-end systems to support this? As much as I would love to believe that everybody has a really robust enterprise-grade CMS, the truth is, a lot of people don't. So WordPress, I make fun of WordPress sometimes, but I use it myself. It has the ability to do custom fields, but a lot of people just treat it as a web page publishing tool. It's like, that's the beauty of WordPress, right? You just dump everything in that one box and it magically shows up on a web page. Similarly, there's a lot of organizations that simply don't have a CMS at all. 57% of federal agencies do not use a CMS at all. And so I guess I would say it's not evenly distributed. I think there's plenty of organizations that have the tools to make this happen and maybe are just not there yet or haven't gone through this process. And there's plenty of other organizations that I would say, hey, if you are now here in 2015 thinking that a content management system is right for you, the way that you get a content management system that works now and in the future is doing this kind of content modeling exercise first.
And turning on the bells and whistles, because that's the other thing. They buy them, but they get the vanilla version that can't do this, and they go, but that costs too much.
Right. That's how they get you.
All right, well, let's thank Karen again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.